Hello and welcome to another edition of the Marc Medley Show. And like all my episodes, in my view, they're all special. But this one in particular is special to the second power, and I'll tell you why. Because I record this on the 50th anniversary of the assassination of one of my favorite people who walked this planet. And that is none other than the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee at the Lorraine Motel. It was about 6 o'clock in the evening as Martin stepped out onto that balcony. The shot rang out. For the most part, ending his life, even though those that did research found that Martin actually was still alive, even hanging on by a thread. But he was still alive when he got to the hospital, and allegedly the doctors who worked on him finished the job. See, nobody's going to make me believe that that was a one-man operation, that James Earl Ray took Dr. King out. The same as I don't believe that Lee Harvey Oswald, as a lone shooter, took out President John F. Kennedy. Call me a conspiracy theorist, call me whatever you want to call me. But there's no doubt in my mind those men and others were not taken out by some quack, some lone nut shooter. Today is an interesting day because as the day went on, my mind would drift back and forth to on 50 years ago. Dr. King was taking his last steps and last movements and activities and really didn't know it. As today around 1 o'clock, I looked at the clock and I shared with my wife how, wow, Martin was coming down to his last hours and didn't even realize it. He was looking forward to going to dinner that evening at a colleague's home as he was in Memphis supporting the sanitation workers who were on strike. So he was looking forward to a soul food dinner, not realizing that he'd never get to that dinner because the plot had been laid. Not realizing, and even though he always knew, because even, I believe on his speech the night before, he had said something about his plane coming into Memphis, how it was delayed as they had to search the plane because they had gotten, I believe, a bomb threat, that a bomb was on the plane, so before they could take off. So he always knew that his life was in danger. He just didn't know when. And this is what I mean. If you look into my introduction of this particular episode in the description, where I say, I love what Martin Luther King stood for. Because I dare to say, not a one of us could have done what he did. Or maybe put it this way, not a one of us would choose to do what he did, because truth be told, really no one has done that since to that degree. Think about it. Martin's house was bombed several times. He was stabbed. Constant death threats coming on the telephone. His family was in danger. And yet he constantly moved toward the mission. He constantly steadfastly stood for trying to make life better for others, not just black people. Because see, a lot of people get that twisted. They think Martin was fighting just for black people, but he wasn't fighting just for African Americans, just for black folks. He was fighting for everybody. Martin's thing was everybody should have the same opportunities regardless of their skin color, regardless of their ethnicity, that we were all human beings, and therefore we should all have the same opportunities. That there was no one better than the other. Like, you should not be afforded something because of the color of your skin, and I should be shut out because of the color of mine. That's what Martin was fighting for. And it's not that he wasn't fearful, because he was. If you read any of his history, and I have so many books on Martin that I've read, he will share the times when he was fearful, when he talks about how he got into his kitchen table and started talking to God and praying. And how after saying that prayer, how he was invigorated and strengthened to go back into the fight. Or the courage to come out on your front porch after it had been bombed with your babies in there and tell the crowd who wanted to start shooting to put down your weapons and go home. It was the same thing Jesus did with Peter when Peter wanted to cut off, or he did cut off, the centurion's ear, and Jesus put it back. It's that same type of love, that same type of calling that it's few, if ever, I've researched or read or have known. That's why my love for Martin is so deep. I've shared on this podcast and on the radio show before. It's Jesus, my father, and Martin. Now, I love everybody, but it's those three I hold in the highest regard for obvious reasons. Anyone who's studied, if you studied Martin, because right now Martin is a hero to everybody, but Martin was hated because of what he was trying to do. And it really took up another level, as I've shared before, and his nephew confirmed that for me when I had the opportunity to talk to him. When I talked to Isaac, his nephew, he was really hated when he started speaking out against that Vietnam War. As I shared with you before, that's whenever the powers that be said, he's got to go. When he started speaking out against that Vietnam War. But he had the courage, because somewhere in one of his speeches he says, I am not going to separate my morals. So that's why whenever he started speaking out against the Vietnam War, that's what he was saying. There was those in his own camp were saying, Martin, don't speak out against that. Matter of fact, there was a lot in his own camp. A lot of times they would tell Martin, we wouldn't go that way. And Martin said, this is the way we're going. Absolute phenomenal person. Only had 39 short years. Words can't describe. I mean, if you ever come to any of my offices in my home, you will see the various pictures of Martin that I have all over the place in my library. A ton of books. Because as I said, I studied Dr. King the same way Dr. King studied Gandhi. The same way that the same thing or the same manner that Gandhi meant to him is what King means to me. So I would be remiss to let the 50th anniversary of his assassination pass and not say something. Thank you. Because had it not been for Martin's leadership and all those who were following and who were a part of that movement, I know for a fact I would not have had the opportunities as an African American male that I've had. For a fact, I would not have been able to travel around the world, to be able to hold the titles and the positions, to be on the school campuses, to sit in front of buses. Had it not been for Dr. King and those of that nature, of that ilk, in that movement, those who died, so that the future, so that generations coming after them would be able to do things and go places and see things that none of them were able to see. So if nothing else, I can say thank you, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for what you and the folks that worked with you and all the others that they did during that time frame. And that was in the 60s. See, again, and I think I've shared this with you. As children, when we weren't like families that went off to Aspen, Colorado, and went off to Cancun and went off to Europe. As an African American child, those things were foreign to us. So our vacations for those who did go on vacation, was to that place called down south. And down south meant, from those of us who were in the New York area, New Jersey area, Connecticut area, down south was Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Florida. That was down south. So every summer, because my grandparents, one of my paternal grandparents lived in Virginia, we went down south. My maternal grandparents was in North Carolina. So we went down south. And to get down south, we had to travel down the Interstate Highway 95. And again, not knowing how other races traveled or other ethnicities traveled or other economic categories traveled, I thought the way we traveled was the way everyone traveled. And that was, you cooked whatever you were going to take with you in the car. I remember my mom frying chicken. I remember going to the store and buying potato chips and other snacks and freezing sodas in the freezer so that they would be cold whenever we were ready to drink them on the road. I thought that's the way everyone traveled. What I didn't realize was that's the way African Americans had to travel, because they were not allowed to stop in the restaurants on the highway. They were not allowed to sit in at those counters and eat like other races and ethnicities. Could stop, go to the bathroom, eat in the restaurant, come back out to their car and hit the highway. African Americans maybe were lucky they got the gasoline, were able to get back in their car, and they ate their food in the car. Either they stopped somewhere or ate while the car was rolling. What I didn't realize was that's what we had to do. And had it not been for Martin Luther King Jr. and folks like that, we might still be doing that. In some respects, it almost looks as if we're going back to that. So it is important that we commemorate, that we stop and pause to recognize what those folks did. Dr. King gave his life. 39 years old. As he said, like anyone, he would have liked to have lived a long life. But that was not to be. He said in that speech on April 3rd, on that rainy night in that Masonic Hall, I may not get there with you, but we will get to the promised land, because he's seen the mountaintop. And I may be paraphrasing because I don't have it in front of me, but I know it well enough. Had it not been for those folks, so it is only appropriate that we stop and we pause to recognize, first, Martin Luther King Jr. was a man of God. He was called. He was a Baptist preacher. That's why Reverend goes first. He was a reverend who had an earned doctorate degree. So he was Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I had not known of none like him before him other than Jesus, and really, in all honesty, haven't known of anyone like that since, who constantly was out leading the charge for equality and freedom and integration for everybody, not just some, but for all. I can remember 50 years ago because I was here. The same way that right now I am 55, about to turn 56 in August. At that time I was 5, about to turn 6 that August. And I remember when that came on the television, the reaction of my parents. And I remember going into our bathroom and putting myself in the bathtub. I don't know why I did that. It was almost as if it was such a sadness. It was such a tragedy. The reaction to my parents of them hearing the news, for some reason, caused me to run in the bathroom and just jump in the bathtub. I don't know if I was hiding. I don't know what I was doing, but I remember it. And it's hard to believe that 50 years have gone by that quickly. At this time, 50 years ago, the country was in chaos. As your various cities around the country started going up in flames, as folks started doing the exact opposite of what Dr. King was about. But they had it. Because someone who was trying to do it peacefully and the right way and non-violently was taken out violently. So folks had it and they were fed up. So they started torching cities like Newark, Detroit, Chicago, LA. I would be remiss, again, had I not recorded this podcast prior to April 4th going out. I cannot thank Dr. King, his family, the folks that worked in that movement. I've had the opportunity to speak with members in his family. I've spoke with his cousin. I've spoke with his nephew. At some point, I'm going to try to get his daughter on the show. And then to see his granddaughter a couple of weeks ago in the March for Our Lives demonstration. 8-year-old Yolanda Renee King. Oh, that did my heart good. That did my heart well. We can't all be Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but as he always says, as he said, the time for right is always right. The time to do right is always right. All of us can do our part. All of us can do right. Not perfect. Because as was said in a service tonight, Martin was not perfect. There is no perfect person. But Martin knew his calling. He knew his purpose. He knew his mission. He did not stray away from that and ultimately lost his life. And ultimately, life was better for everybody because of his efforts and all the people who worked with him and around him. You can catch me live on Saturday mornings as I host my radio show, The Reading Circle with Marc Medley, from 6 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time to 9 a.m. It web streams around the world on gobrave.org and is heard in the New York area on FM radio 88.7 FM. You can find me on Twitter at the Twitter handle at Reading Circle 01 or at Marc Medley Show. That's MarcMedley Show, SHOW. That's on Twitter. Either one of those Twitter sites you can find me on. Again, I am grateful and thankful to Dr. King and all the folks like them because, again, I would not have had all the opportunities that I've had it not been for them. To say that I sit and stand on their shoulders is an understatement. And because it looks like the clock is trying to turn backwards, we have to keep fighting. We have to be warriors. We have to be warrior just like Dr. King in our own special way. So I thank you for listening. Please be sure you can subscribe to the podcast on any of the major distribution podcast sites: iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, YouTube, Stitcher, iHeart. It's on all of them. Let somebody know about it. Please follow and subscribe.